The arrival of Eddie Knight, Christopher Fairbank, is causing problems for new parents George Knight, Colin Salmon, and Nicola Mitchell, Laura Doddington in EastEnders. Eddie is George's adoptive father, and was sent to prison for murder after it was revealed that he killed George's biological dad. He has returned to our screens after Nicola found him in a hospital bed. While she made no bones about the fact that George would want nothing to do with him, standing firmly beside her boyfriend, she was rocked all over again when Eddie revealed that he was dying. Eddie's return has come just weeks after the birth of George and Nicola's daughter Ivy. In upcoming episodes, it's the day of the baby's Ghanaian naming ceremony, but Nicola is somewhat distracted by the secret meeting with Eddie's prison officer. Nicola then chats to George and says that Eddie moving in is the right thing to do, but fails to mention the fact his dad has offered her a large sum of money as an exchange. George thinks it's a terrible idea, but after Nicola presses, he eventually agrees to the idea of Eddie moving into the basement flat. Things get awkward for the couple later in the week, as Eddie arrives during Ivy's naming ceremony. Left alone, Eddie tells Nicola that she won't get his money unless he's allowed to live upstairs with the family in the main house. Stressed, Nicola goes over the finances at Harry's barn again, but concludes to Harry Mitchell, Elijah Holloway, that they definitely need Eddie's cash to stop the business from going under. As the week draws to a close, Cindy Beale, Michelle Collins, tries to dissuade George from helping Eddie, but he ignores her. Will Eddie's final plot destroy George and Nicola's relationship? Or will Nicola tell George what his dad is up to before it's too late? The rain hammered against the windows of the Queen Vic as the evening crowd swelled inside. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the low hum of gossip filled the pub, but in the corner booth near the dartboard, EastEnders character Nicola Mitchell looked as though the world was collapsing around her. Her fingers trembled around a mug of tea gone cold. Across Albert Square, George Knight stood outside the pub doors, staring at his phone for the third time. Nicola's text had been short and unsettling. Need to talk. Alone. George had spent the entire day trying to ignore the knot forming in his stomach. Ever since Nicola had returned to Walford, she carried an air of desperation that made everyone uneasy. She smiled too much, laughed too loudly, and avoided certain questions entirely. And George knew enough about people to recognize fear when he saw it. He stepped into the Vic, immediately spotting her. Nicola glanced up, forcing a weak smile. "You came. You sounded serious," George replied cautiously as he sat opposite her. "What's going on?" Nicola looked around to make sure nobody was listening. Elaine was busy serving drinks. Linda was arguing with a supplier near the bar. Nobody paid them attention. Still, Nicola leaned closer. "I've done something terrible." George frowned. "What kind of terrible?" For a moment she couldn't speak. Her eyes glistened as she inhaled shakily. "You remember that money Harry lost months ago?" George nodded slowly. Everyone in Walford remembered. Harry had sworn somebody robbed him during one of his gambling spirals, though nobody ever proved anything. "I took it," Nicola whispered. George blinked in disbelief. I didn't mean for it to spiral like this," she rushed out. "I was desperate. The debts were piling up. People were calling constantly, threatening me. I thought if I borrowed it for a few days, I could replace it before anyone noticed. But Harry nearly destroyed himself over that money," George snapped quietly. "You let him believe someone betrayed him." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I know." George leaned back heavily, stunned. Nicola had always been chaotic, but this was different. This was calculated. "Why tell me now?" "Because I can't live with it anymore." Her voice cracked. "Every time I look at Harry I feel sick. And if the truth comes out another way," she swallowed hard, "he'll never forgive me." George rubbed his jaw, struggling to process the confession. "You need to tell him." "I can't. You just told me." "That's different." George's expression hardened. "No, Nicola. It isn't." She looked down at the table, shaking. The silence between them stretched painfully. Finally George sighed. "There's more, isn't there?" Nicola froze. George noticed immediately. "What else are you hiding?" "Nothing." "Nicola." Her breathing quickened. "I said nothing." George had seen this reaction before. From boxers before fights, from people moments before they broke apart emotionally. Nicola wasn't simply ashamed. She was terrified. Before he could press further, The pub doors burst open. Harry stormed inside. "There you are," he barked, glaring at Nicola. "I've been calling you for hours." Nicola immediately wiped her eyes and straightened herself. "I didn't hear my phone." Harry looked between her and George suspiciously. "What's going on?" "Just talking," George answered calmly. Harry scoffed. "Funny. Looks more like a funeral." Nicola stood quickly. "Can we not do this here?" But Harry was already frustrated. "No, actually, let's do this here. Because lately everyone's acting weird around me." Several punters turned to watch. George lowered his voice. "Take it outside." Harry ignored him. "Mum, if something's going on, I deserve to know." Nicola's lips parted slightly. George saw panic flood her face. For one fleeting second, he genuinely believed she was about to confess everything. But then she looked away. "It's nothing," she muttered. Harry laughed bitterly. "Right. Course it is." He stormed back out into the square. Nicola sank into her seat again, visibly shaking. "You had your chance," George said quietly. "I couldn't. You need to stop lying before this gets worse." Her eyes darted toward the door, making sure Harry was gone. Then she whispered something so quietly George barely heard it. "You don't understand." "Then explain." Nicola opened her mouth, but no words came out. Because the truth she hadn't revealed was far darker than stolen money. Later that night, George walked home through the square, unable to shake the conversation from Nicola's his mind. Behavior didn't add up. People stole for desperation all the time. But this felt deeper, bigger. And George knew instinctively she was protecting someone. As he reached the cafe, he noticed Nicola standing alone beneath the flickering market lights. She looked frightened, glancing over her shoulder repeatedly. George approached carefully. "You all right?" She jumped. "Don't do that. Why are you acting like someone's after you?" Nicola hesitated before giving a hollow laugh. "Maybe someone is." George's face darkened. "What does that mean?" Again she almost spoke. Again she stopped herself. "I just need time." "For what?" "To fix things." George shook his head firmly. "Secrets don't stay buried in Walford." Nicola looked at him sadly. "That's what I'm afraid of." A black car rolled slowly past the square entrance. Nicola immediately stiffened. George noticed. The car disappeared around the corner, but Nicola's face had turned pale. "Who was that?" George demanded. "No one." "That didn't look like no one." She grabbed his arm suddenly. "Promise me something." George frowned. "Depends what it is. If anything happens, if Harry starts asking questions, don't tell him about the money yet." George stared at her incredulously. "You're still thinking about that? You don't understand how dangerous this is." "Dangerous." The word lingered heavily between them. George stepped closer. "Nicola, what have you gotten yourself into?" But before she could answer, a voice echoed across the square. "Mum." Harry was back. Nicola instantly released George's arm and stepped away. Harry approached, suspicious again. "Seriously? You two are still together?" George sighed. "Your mum's upset. That's all." Harry looked directly at Nicola. "About what?" Nicola forced a smile so fake it was painful to watch. "Nothing, sweetheart." Harry stared at her for several seconds. Then, unexpectedly, his expression softened. "You've been weird for weeks," he admitted quietly. "If something's wrong, just tell me." Nicola's eyes welled with tears again. George could practically see the internal battle tearing her apart. Tell him. Lie again. Tell him. Lie again. In the end, fear won. "I'm fine," she whispered. Harry nodded reluctantly, though he clearly didn't believe her. "All right," he muttered before walking off once more. The moment he disappeared, Nicola broke down completely. George guided her onto a nearby bench. "You can't keep doing this." "I know." "Then stop." She covered her face with both hands. "You ever make one mistake," she whispered through tears, "and suddenly your whole life belongs to it?" George said nothing, because now he understood. This wasn't just guilt. Someone had leverage over her. "Who's blackmailing you?" he asked quietly. Nicola looked up sharply. "Bingo." George's expression hardened. "Who is it?" But Nicola shook her head immediately. "I can't say." If someone's threatening you, we go to the police. No! She snapped loudly enough to startle nearby residents. Her breathing became ragged again. You can't involve the police. Why not? Nicola stood abruptly. Because if the truth comes out, she paused, tears streaming freely now. Harry's life will be destroyed. George stared at her in stunned silence. Before he could respond, Nicola hurried away into the darkness, leaving George alone in the square with more questions than answers. And as the market lights flickered overhead, one terrifying thought settled into his mind. The stolen money was only the beginning. Whatever Nicola was hiding could tear the Mitchell family apart forever. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to EastEnders Spoilers Official.